My best friend ghosted me after ex-boyfriend committed suicide, but turns out she was being blackmailed, and the truth was 10 times worse than I could have ever imagined. When I was 15, I found my first love, Amy. It was one of those friendships where you tell each other what you had for breakfast, whether or not you remembered to go to your dentist appointment at 3:30 p.m. on a random Tuesday, and give each other the answers for homework. And even when I got my boyfriend, Oscar, she was still my priority. Actually, we would all hang out together. We even had our own inside jokes. My school life became so sweet that I forgot how bad things at home were. But like any 10th grade relationship, we broke up. And because it was during the pandemic, my comfort was found in Disney Plus movies and making those foam coffees from TikTok. Well, that and calls with Amy. If not for her, there's no way I would have been eating more than half a meal a day, or even be able to brush my teeth every night. And even when I was being a dumba and fell into the breakup, get back together cycle with Oscar, she stuck by me. She'd listen to me rant about the same thing for hours on end, and listen like it was the first time ever. But then things took a turn. It was the start of 11th grade, and out of nowhere, Amy practically started ignoring me. It hurt even more than my breakups with Oscar. For months, I tried everything to extend the olive branch. When she ignored my texts about homework answers, I printed them out and left them in her locker. And when she practically ran away from me as soon as school ended, I started leaving baskets at her door multiple times a week, filled with her favorite instant noodles, fruit, and VP flavor. I always had this nagging feeling like something was very wrong, and I knew ignoring it would mean that I was neglecting my friend in her time of need. But by December, I had given up, because things had taken such a turn with Oscar that I couldn't focus on anything anymore. My grades went to poop. I could barely breathe because of how much I was simping, and I could barely sit in class without soaking my CVID mask with tears. And when Christmas break came, things got even more confusing. Because it was 2020, the year Christmas was ruined for me forever. Because as I unwrapped my gifts under the tree, enjoying the only day of the year where my parents didn't hit or yell at us, I got the call. It was Amy. I practically sprinted towards the bathroom to take it. "Are you sitting down?" I lied and said yes, just wanting her to get the information out as fast as possible. She followed up the information with a "sorry for your loss," before instantly hanging up the phone. I couldn't help but start shouting in pain. It felt like my heart was being penetrated with shards of glass. Suddenly, my instincts kicked in, and I grabbed the nearest towel and stuffed it in my mouth. But it was too late, because my parents had already heard me. And just like that, Christmas was ruined. Because Oscar had unalived by sewer slide. And because I failed to hide it from my parents, they came upstairs and started wailing on me for ruining Christmas Day. After that, I locked myself in the bathroom, sobbing uncontrollably, trying to get online to see if it was really true. Then I saw Oscar's mom's Facebook post, this formal announcement thanking everyone for their prayers during this difficult time, and I completely lost it. I threw up until there was nothing left, then just dry heaved on the bathroom floor. Christmas was officially ruined forever, but that was just the beginning of how my entire life would unravel. When school started back in January, I walked through the halls like a zombie. I expected some acknowledgement from our classmates about Oscar, maybe a memorial announcement or counselors checking in with his friends, but there was nothing. A few teachers gave me these sad, knowing looks, but no one actually said anything. It was like everyone was pretending he never existed. I kept checking my phone, hoping Amy would text me something. Anything more about what happened. How did he do it? Did he leave a note? Why hadn't anyone seen it coming? The questions kept circling in my head with no answers. One day I spotted Amy in the cafeteria sitting with some people I barely recognized. I practically ran over, desperate for information, but the second she saw me, she grabbed her tray and left. The other kids at the table gave me these weird looks, like I was contaminated. I stood there feeling like a complete idiot, tears welling up again. A girl I didn't know whispered something about me being the crazy ex, loud enough for me to hear. I skipped the rest of my classes that day and hid in the stadium bleachers, smoking until I couldn't feel anything. That weekend, Marcus dropped a bombshell at dinner. His daughter Zoe from his first marriage was moving in with us, temporarily, because of problems at her mom's. But the way he looked at me when he said it made it clear she was actually coming to spy on me or something. "Maybe having another girl around will help with your attitude problem," he said, smirking like he'd just solved everything. I wanted to scream that my attitude problem was actually grief, but I knew better than to talk back. Zoe arrived the next day with approximately 50 boxes of stuff for a temporary stay. She was a year older than me and immediately acted like she owned the place. My mom gave her the spare room next to mine, but Zoe kept finding reasons to come into my space, borrowing makeup, asking to use my charger, or just straight up snooping through my things when I was in the shower. I started locking myself in the bathroom for hours because it was literally the only place I had any privacy. The bathroom became my sad little sanctuary. I'd sit on the edge of the tub with my legs pulled up, scrolling through old texts from Oscar and Amy, trying to find some clue I'd missed, some explanation for why my entire world had imploded. I found out about Oscar's memorial service through an Instagram post from a mutual friend. It was being held at his family's church that Saturday. I didn't even tell my parents where I was going, just took the bus across town in the pouring rain, hoping to find some closure. When I arrived, completely soaked, Oscar's mom was standing at the entrance greeting people. The second she saw me, her face hardened. "You're not welcome here," she said, blocking the door. "Haven't you done enough?" I had no idea what she was talking about. I tried explaining that I just wanted to say goodbye, but she called over Oscar's dad, who firmly told me to leave before they called security. I couldn't believe what was happening. I stood across the street in the rain, watching through the windows as people filed in, many of whom barely knew Oscar. I recognized some kids from school who'd never even spoken to him when he was alive. Yet there I was, someone who had actually loved him, forced to watch from outside like some kind of criminal. I went home completely broken, shivering and confused. I sat on the bus with rainwater dripping down my face, mixing with tears, while other passengers kept shooting me these concerned glances, like they thought I might be having some kind of breakdown. And honestly, they weren't wrong. Later that week, I was passing by Zoe's room when I heard her on the phone. "Yeah, that Amy girl told everyone about Oscar and the stepdad situation," she was saying to someone. "The crazy ex-girlfriend doesn't even know yet." I froze in the hallway, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. When Zoe spotted me, she quickly ended her call and glared at me. "Were you talking about me? What about Amy and Oscar?" I demanded. Zoe rolled her eyes dramatically. "God, you're so paranoid. I don't even know what you're talking about." Before I could press her further, she yelled downstairs, "Marcus! She's harassing me again." Within seconds, Marcus thundered up the stairs, his face that dangerous shade of red I'd learned to fear. He grabbed my phone out of my hand, saying I was clearly not responsible enough to have one if I was going to bully his daughter. Just like that, my last connection to the outside world was gone. Mom said nothing, as usual, just stared at her wine glass like it contained the secrets of the universe. That night, I cried myself to sleep, feeling like the walls were closing in around me. I seriously considered sneaking out and running away, but where would I even go? I had no money, no friends I could turn to, and winter in our state meant I'd probably freeze to death before I got very far. The school counselor called me in a few days later. Apparently, one of my teachers had expressed concern about my behavioral changes. I sat in that tiny office with its motivational posters and fake plant, while Ms. Patel asked gentle questions about how I was processing Oscar's death. After 15 minutes of me giving one-word answers, something in me just snapped. I started talking and couldn't stop. About Oscar, about Amy ghosting me, about how nobody would tell me what happened or why everyone was treating me like I had done something wrong. I was crying so hard I didn't notice Ms. Patel's expression changing from sympathy to concern as she stared at my arms. I'd rolled up my sleeves without thinking, revealing the bruises from where Marcus had grabbed me during our last discussion about my attitude. "Nora, how did you get those bruises?" she asked, her voice shifting to this careful, neutral tone they must teach in counselor school. I immediately pulled my sleeves down, mumbling something about falling during gym class. But Ms. Patel wasn't buying it. She started asking these pointed questions about my home life, and before I knew it, there was talk about mandatory reporting and safety assessments. I panicked, begging her not to call home, knowing it would only make things worse. But the machinery had already started, this whole investigation I never asked for, bringing even more chaos into my disaster of a life. By the end of the day, I was sitting in the principal's office while some lady from Child Protective Services explained that I would be staying with a relative while they looked into some concerns. My Aunt Tess was my mom's younger sister who'd always been the cool aunt, bringing me banned books and feminist t-shirts that Marcus accidentally threw away. She lived in an apartment about 30 minutes away with her 2 cats and a seemingly endless collection of vintage band posters. When she picked me up from school that day, she didn't bombard me with questions like I expected. She just said, "My place isn't fancy, but there's ice cream in the freezer and nobody's going to yell at you there." I actually slept through the night for the first time in months. I woke up to the smell of pancakes and coffee, which was so different from the tense silence of breakfast at home that for a minute I didn't even remember where I was. The next morning over breakfast, Lucky Charms, which were never allowed at home, Tess finally asked about what was going on. Unlike every other adult, she actually listened without interrupting when I explained about Amy ghosting me, Oscar's suicide, and how everyone was acting weird around me. When I finished, she had this thoughtful look on her face. "Have you considered that Amy might know something about Oscar's death that she's not telling you?" she asked. "Maybe she's not avoiding you to be cruel. Maybe there's something she's afraid to tell you." That thought had never occurred to me. I'd been so hurt by her abandonment that I hadn't considered she might have had a reason beyond just being done with our friendship. That night, I borrowed Tess's laptop and went full detective mode, scrolling back through months of social media posts. I started with Oscar's Instagram, which was still up. Going through his old comments section, I noticed something I'd completely missed before. There were exchanges between him and Amy on posts from periods when Oscar and I were broken up. Nothing overtly suspicious, just inside jokes and references I didn't understand. But there was one comment thread that caught my attention. Amy had written, "Did you talk to anyone about the situation with M?" And Oscar had replied, "Not yet. Too complicated. Call you later." I had no idea who M was or what situation they were referring to, but it was clear they had been communicating privately during times I thought Amy was solely focused on supporting me through the breakups. I became obsessed with figuring out who M was. Marcus? Someone named Mike or Matt from school? I made lists of everyone we knew with M names, trying to connect dots that probably weren't even there. I barely slept, convinced this mysterious M was somehow connected to Oscar's suicide and Amy's sudden distance. I started keeping this crazy conspiracy journal where I'd write down every tiny detail I could remember about Amy's behavior before she ghosted me, about Oscar's mood swings, about Marcus's interactions with both of them. Looking back at those scribbled pages now, I can see I was slowly putting together the truth even then. I just couldn't face what it all meant. After a few days of this, I convinced Tess to drive me past Amy's house, just to see if she was even there, I said. It was around 8 p.m. when we parked across the street. I could see Amy's bedroom light was on, the familiar glow of her star-shaped lamp visible through the curtains. Telling Tess I'd be right back, I approached the house, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. Before I could even ring the doorbell, the door opened, and Amy's mom stood there, looking absolutely terrified. "You can't be here," she whispered, checking over her shoulder like someone might be listening. "It's not safe for any of us." She started to close the door, but I stuck my foot in, desperate. "Please, Mrs. Reyes, I just need to know what's going on. Why won't Amy talk to me? What happened to Oscar?" Her eyes widened at Oscar's name. "Go home, Nora. For your own good. Amy can't help you. She pushed harder against the door until I had to remove my foot or risk breaking toes. I walked back to Tess's car in a daze, my concern for Amy transforming into real fear. Whatever was happening was clearly bigger and more dangerous than teen drama. The next day at school, I cornered Taylor, Amy's lab partner, in the bathroom between classes. Taylor had always been friendly enough, though we weren't close. I need to talk to you about Amy, I said, blocking the door so she couldn't leave. Taylor looked nervous, glancing around like someone might overhear us even though we were alone. I don't know anything, she said automatically. Bullshit. You guys have been working together all semester. She must have said something about why she's avoiding everyone. Taylor fidgeted with her bracelets, clearly uncomfortable. Look, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but Amy wasn't just avoiding you. Before she went all weird and quiet, she told me she was trying to gather evidence against someone. Someone she said was predatory. She seemed really scared. My mind immediately flashed to the mysterious M from Oscar's Instagram. Did she say who? I pressed. Taylor shook her head. She wouldn't give me a name, just said it was someone with power who could hurt people she cared about if she didn't handle it carefully. Then she stopped talking to me too. The bell rang, and Taylor used my momentary distraction to squeeze past me and escape. I stood there in the bathroom, my mind racing with horrible possibilities. I skipped my next 2 classes, just sitting in a bathroom stall trying to piece together what Taylor had told me with the weird fragments I already had. The words predatory and someone with power kept echoing in my head, making me feel sick to my stomach every time I thought about what they might mean. That night, I remembered something. Oscar and I had shared passwords during one of our "we'll be together forever" phases. On a hunch, I tried logging into his email using the password we'd created, his dog's name plus the year we met. Amazingly, it worked. I felt a little guilty snooping through his private messages, but I needed answers. Most of it was boring school stuff, gaming forums, and Netflix notifications. Then I found a folder labeled simply M in his archived items. Inside were dozens of emails between Oscar and an account I recognized immediately. It belonged to Marcus, my stepdad. My blood ran cold as I started reading. The exchanges started innocently enough, Marcus complimenting Oscar on a baseball game, offering advice about college applications, but they quickly evolved into something more sinister. Marcus asking Oscar for favors, making inappropriate comments about pictures Oscar had posted online, then escalating to veiled threats about our special arrangement and keeping quiet about our conversations. In the later emails, Oscar's tone changed from respectful to frightened, begging Marcus to leave me alone and stop asking for more pictures. Marcus responded with references to what would happen to Nora if Oscar didn't cooperate. I felt physically sick reading them, having to run to the bathroom to throw up halfway through. My own stepdad had been preying on my boyfriend. The mysterious M wasn't some unknown threat. He lived in my house. I could barely process what I was reading. Suddenly, so many things made sense. Oscar's mood swings during our relationship, his reluctance to come to my house, the weird tension whenever Marcus was around. I remembered how Oscar would sometimes get strange texts that made him go pale, claiming they were from his dad when I asked. With shaking hands, I forwarded the emails to myself, then deleted them from Oscar's sent folder to cover my tracks. I couldn't sleep that night, my mind replaying every interaction between Oscar and Marcus, looking for signs I'd missed. I kept thinking about all the times Oscar had made excuses not to come over, or how he'd sometimes flinch when Marcus came into a room, or how he'd change the subject whenever Marcus's name came up. How could I have been so blind? How had I missed something so obvious happening right under my nose? The guilt was overwhelming. While I'd been complaining about petty relationship drama, Oscar had been suffering through something truly horrific, unable to tell me because Marcus was using me as leverage against him. The next morning, I found Zoe alone in the kitchen when I stopped by the house to pick up more clothes. Without thinking, I blurted out, "Did you know what Marcus was doing to Oscar?" I expected denial, anger, maybe even confusion. Instead, Zoe's coffee mug slipped from her hand, shattering on the tile floor. Her face drained of color. "How did you find out?" she whispered. "You knew?" I felt a new wave of nausea. "I found emails. Why didn't you say something?" Zoe sank into a chair, suddenly looking much younger than her 18 years. "Why do you think I really moved in?" "It wasn't problems with my mom. It was because he started paying too much attention to my friends when they came over. Mom doesn't know. She'd never believe me anyway. He told me he'd stop if I came to live here instead." Something passed between us in that moment. A shared understanding, a recognition of the monster hiding behind Marcus's concerned parent facade. Amy figured it out, Zoe continued quietly, glancing toward the stairs to make sure we were still alone. She was trying to help Oscar. That's why she couldn't talk to you. Marcus threatened her family's immigration status if she didn't stay away from you. He was afraid she'd tell you what was happening. Everything suddenly clicked into horrible focus. Amy hadn't abandoned me. She'd been trying to protect me while gathering evidence against Marcus. And Oscar. I couldn't even complete the thought. The pain was too enormous. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. All this time I'd been feeling sorry for myself, thinking my best friend had ditched me for no reason, when she'd actually been trying to save me. Oscar. And who knows how many others from Marcus. And Oscar had been carrying this awful secret, being manipulated and abused by my stepdad, thinking he couldn't tell me because it would put me in danger. No wonder he couldn't handle it anymore. The weight of that realization was crushing. Zoe and I formed an unlikely alliance that day. She explained that Amy had discovered Marcus was messaging teenage boys online, including Oscar and several others from school. When Amy tried to help Oscar document the abuse, Marcus had somehow found out and threatened not just Amy but her entire family, who were green card holders still working towards citizenship. Amy had distanced herself from me partly to protect herself, but also to protect me. Marcus had made it clear that I would suffer if Amy spoke to me about what she knew. We decided our first step was to retrieve Oscar's belongings from his school locker, which had been sealed since his death out of respect. It took some doing, a forged note from my mom, a story about needing a textbook Oscar had borrowed, but we finally convinced the assistant principal to let us in. Most of the locker had been cleaned out by Oscar's parents, but stuffed in the back, we found an old journal. Flipping through it, we discovered several pages had been torn out, leaving behind fragmentary information about M's demands and evidence for later. It wasn't much, but it confirmed what we already suspected. Oscar had been keeping records of Marcus's behavior. The torn out pages were concerning, though. Had Oscar removed them, or had someone else gotten to the journal first? We pieced together that Oscar had already been struggling with depression before Marcus began manipulating him. Marcus had used that vulnerability, first offering himself as a father figure, which Oscar desperately needed after his parents' divorce, then gradually escalating to inappropriate requests, and eventually blackmail. From the journal fragments, we learned Oscar had been saving screenshots and recording conversations as evidence, planning to eventually report Marcus. But something had gone terribly wrong. It made me physically ill to think about how calculated Marcus had been, how he'd identified a vulnerable kid and systematically exploited that vulnerability, all while maintaining this perfect stepdad image to the outside world. I kept having these vivid flashbacks to times when Marcus had been extra nice to Oscar, offering to drive him home or help with college applications, and now I understood the sinister motives behind that fake kindness. We needed to see Oscar's suicide note. According to school gossip, he'd left one that the administration had turned over to his parents. Mr. Chen, our English teacher who had always liked me, seemed like our best chance at getting information. After class one day, I stayed behind, and with Zoe standing lookout, I told him a carefully edited version of what we'd discovered. Mr. Chen listened with growing concern, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, he sat in silence for a long moment. What you're describing is very serious, Nora. This needs to go to the authorities. I explained that we needed more concrete evidence first. My word against Marcus's wouldn't be enough, especially given my troubled teen reputation. Reluctantly, Mr. Chen admitted he had seen the note before it was given to Oscar's parents. He hadn't made a copy, but he remembered it mentioned not being able to live with what M made me do, and betraying someone I care about. According to Mr. Chen, the note also referenced evidence in the cloud, but didn't provide any access details. This confirmed our suspicions, but added a new disturbing layer. What had Marcus coerced Oscar into doing that caused him such unbearable guilt? After days of detective work, I finally tracked down Amy through her cousin's Instagram. She was staying with relatives in the next town over, effectively hiding from Marcus. I took 3 buses to get there, jumping every time my phone buzzed. Terrified Marcus somehow knew what I was doing. When I finally stood on her cousin's doorstep, Amy answered the door herself. We just stared at each other for a long moment before she pulled me into a crushing hug, both of us crying too hard to speak. We'd barely made it inside when my phone exploded with notifications. Dozens of threatening messages from Marcus, somehow aware that Amy and I were together. I see you're with your friend. Remember our agreement. Another read. Come home now or things will get much worse for everyone. I showed the messages to Amy, whose face went pale. He's monitoring your location, she said, grabbing my phone and immediately turning it off. He must have installed spyware the last time he took your phone. The realization that Marcus had been tracking me all this time sent ice through my veins. Amy's cousin made us tea while Amy finally told me everything. Oscar had initially confided in her about Marcus's inappropriate attention during one of our breakups. Amy had encouraged him to report it, but Marcus had somehow found out they were talking. He'd then used his position as a youth baseball coach to identify other vulnerable boys, manipulating Oscar into helping him gather information about them by claiming he'd hurt me if Oscar refused. When Oscar finally threatened to expose him, Marcus blackmailed him with doctored images and messages that made it appear Oscar had been willingly participating. Seeing no way out and believing he'd betrayed both me and the other boys Marcus was targeting, Oscar had taken his own life. The thought of Oscar suffering alone, believing himself complicit in something so awful, broke something in me. I sobbed until I couldn't breathe, while Amy held me, her own tears soaking my shoulder. When I could finally speak again, I asked the question that had been haunting me. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Amy's eyes filled with fresh tears. He threatened your life, Nora, not just your family situation. He specifically said he would hurt you physically if I spoke to you. I was trying to gather enough evidence to go to the police without putting you in danger. I'm so sorry about Oscar. I never thought he would. She couldn't finish the sentence. We didn't need more words. We understood the impossible situation we'd all been trapped in. Over the next few days, Amy, Zoe, and I worked together compiling everything we had. Oscar's journal fragments, the emails I'd forwarded to myself, screenshots of Marcus's threatening texts, and our written testimonies. But we faced a serious problem. Who could we trust with such explosive allegations? Marcus was well connected in our community, serving on the school board and coaching youth sports. People saw him as a pillar of the community, not a predator. Amy suggested her cousin's girlfriend, Rena, who worked as a paralegal at a law firm specializing in family cases. Rena reviewed our evidence with a professional eye, helping us organize it chronologically and explaining what would likely happen if we went to the police. I'm not going to sugarcoat this, she told us, spreading our documents across her dining table. He's going to have supporters who won't believe you. People will say you're making it up for attention, or because you're angry teenagers, or because you want to explain away Oscar's suicide. You need something more concrete, ideally recordings or recent messages that clearly show his behavior. We decided to set up a sting operation using Zoe's phone, which Marcus didn't monitor. We crafted careful messages designed to get Marcus to reveal his pattern of behavior, with Zoe pretending to have a friend he might be interested in. It was risky and made us all feel dirty, but we needed irrefutable evidence. I remember sitting with Amy and Zoe drafting these messages, trying to think like Marcus, to anticipate how he would respond. It was one of the most disturbing things I've ever done, deliberately playing into the mindset of a predator to try to catch him. We would type something, then delete it, then try again, our hands shaking the whole time. I kept running to the bathroom to throw up, the whole situation making me physically ill. Our plan went completely sideways when my mom found our evidence folder, which I'd hidden in my old dollhouse at home. I thought it was the perfect spot. Mom never came into my room, and Marcus considered dolls too childish to bother with. But she was, looking for her missing earrings and stumbled across everything. Instead of coming to me first, she confronted Marcus. By the time I found out what happened, he had already destroyed key pieces of evidence and thrown me out of the house, telling my mom I was mentally unstable and making up stories for attention because I couldn't handle Oscar's suicide. Mom, as always, chose to believe him over me. Suddenly homeless and desperate, I moved in with Amy's family, who welcomed me despite their own fears about immigration consequences. Marcus, meanwhile, began a smear campaign at school, telling anyone who would listen that I was having a psychotic break and inventing wild accusations. Several classmates who had been friendly before now avoided me in the halls, whispering behind their hands as I passed. School became unbearable, but we couldn't stop attending without raising more red flags. We finally gathered our courage and what evidence remained to go to the police. The officer who took our statement was an older man named Higgins, who, as our luck would have it, played in a bowling league with Marcus. He listened with thinly veiled skepticism, making notes while occasionally throwing glances at the clock. When we finished our story, he sighed deeply. Look, girls, these are very serious accusations against a respected member of the community. Without more substantial evidence, it's going to be difficult to proceed. Are you sure you're not just confused about some things? Grief can make people see connections that aren't really there. We left the station feeling completely defeated. The system that was supposed to protect us seemed designed instead to protect people like Marcus, adults with connections and reputations. I felt like we were screaming into a void, our voices too small to be heard over the din of adult authority and established power structures. It was like being trapped in one of those nightmares where you try to scream, but no sound comes out, and meanwhile the monster gets closer and closer. It wasn't until Mr. Chen connected us with Detective Rivera from the Special Victims Unit that we found someone who actually took us seriously. Unlike Officer Higgins, Detective Rivera specialized in crimes against minors and didn't automatically dismiss us because of our age. She listened carefully to our story, taking detailed notes and asking thoughtful questions. When we finished, she looked at us with genuine concern. "I believe you," she said simply, and those 3 words nearly broke me all over again. "But," she continued, "belief isn't enough in the legal system. Without more concrete evidence, it will be very difficult to build a case that the district attorney will pursue." She explained our options, none of which seemed good. Then she said something that changed everything. "There is another way, but it's difficult and potentially risky. We could set up a controlled confrontation, you wearing recording devices with officers nearby for protection." The thought of facing Marcus while wearing a wire terrified all of us, but Detective Rivera assured us she wouldn't let anything happen to us. After hours of discussion and more than a few panic attacks, we agreed it was our only option. The confrontation happened at a public park, neutral territory where officers could watch from a distance without being obvious. Detective Rivera had us wear small recording devices hidden under our clothes, with a code word to use if we felt unsafe at any point. Zoe agreed to lead the conversation, since Marcus would be least suspicious of her. We sat at a picnic table trying to look casual while my heart threatened to pound right out of my chest. When Marcus arrived, looking annoyed about being called to a family meeting, I nearly lost my nerve. He sat down heavily across from us, eyes narrowing as he noticed Amy. "What's she doing here?" he demanded, jerking his chin in Amy's direction. I thought I made myself clear about that friendship. Zoe, showing courage I never knew she had, looked him straight in the eye. "We know what you did to Oscar, Dad, and to those other boys. We have the emails." Marcus's face underwent a remarkable transformation, from confusion to anger, to a calculated calm that was somehow more frightening than rage. "I don't know what you think you know, but you're clearly confused." Oscar was disturbed. "He killed himself because he couldn't handle his own problems." "Like the problem of you threatening him?" I asked, amazed my voice didn't shake. "Or the problem of you making him help you find other boys?" Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You need to stop talking right now. You have no idea what kind of trouble you're making for yourselves. No one will believe you over me. I'm a respected coach, a business owner. You're just troubled teens looking for attention." "We have evidence," Amy said, sliding her phone forward to show him one of the emails. "Not just about Oscar, about all of it." For a moment, Marcus looked genuinely panicked. Then his expression hardened. "Evidence can disappear. Phones can break. Accidents happen. Is that really a road you want to go down?" He was threatening us, clear as day, but in words carefully chosen to maintain plausible deniability. Zoe pressed further. "What about those pictures you asked Oscar to send? Or the ones you asked him to help get from other boys? Did those disappear too?" Marcus's control slipped just enough. "Those were freely given. No one was forced to do anything. Besides, Oscar helped set all that up. If he hadn't killed himself, he'd be just as guilty as you're trying to make me out to be." There it was, the admission Detective Rivera needed, captured on our hidden recorders. Marcus had just acknowledged the existence of inappropriate pictures, and Oscar's involvement under his direction. The rest of the conversation was a blur of Marcus alternating between threats and attempts to gaslight us, but we'd already gotten what we needed. When we used our code word, officers moved in, not to arrest Marcus yet, but to ensure we could leave safely. The case against Marcus wasn't perfect. The legal system rarely delivers perfect justice, especially in cases like this. But Detective Rivera built enough of a case that the district attorney agreed to press charges, which led to investigations into other potential victims. When news of the arrest went public, several other boys came forward with similar stories, strengthening the case considerably. My mom's reaction was exactly what I'd expected. Initial disbelief, then anger at me for destroying our family, and finally, when faced with undeniable evidence, a broken acceptance that she'd been married to a monster. Our relationship remains complicated. She's in therapy now, trying to understand how she missed the signs, but sometimes I still catch her looking at me like I'm the one who created this mess. The school community eventually learned the truth, with reactions ranging from shocked support to victim-blaming conspiracy theories. Some parents pulled their kids from teams Marcus had coached, suddenly remembering uncomfortable interactions they'd previously dismissed. A few of Marcus's adult friends tried claiming we were lying for attention, but they quieted down as more victims came forward. Amy and I rebuilt our friendship, stronger for having survived something that could have permanently broken us. We still have moments where the guilt overwhelms us both. Could we have saved Oscar if we'd done something differently? But we're learning to forgive ourselves for being teenagers faced with an impossible situation created by an adult who should have protected us. About a month after Marcus's arrest, Oscar's parents reached out through their lawyer, asking to meet. The meeting was awkward and tearful, with his mom explaining that Marcus had convinced them I was somehow responsible for Oscar's depression. They apologized for shutting me out of the memorial service, showing me cards and pictures I hadn't been allowed to see. Together with Oscar's friends, we created a memorial garden at school, a quiet space with a bench where we sometimes sit and imagine the life Oscar should have had. I moved in with my Aunt Tess permanently while finishing high school, away from the house where so much damage had been done. Some days are still impossibly hard. I have nightmares, panic attacks, and moments where grief hits me like a physical blow. But I understand now what Amy knew all along. Sometimes pushing someone away is the most desperate form of protection. The three of us, Amy, Zoe, and I, formed a survivors club of sorts, meeting weekly to check in and remind each other that none of this was our fault. We're learning that healing isn't linear and justice isn't perfect, but telling the truth, no matter how painful, sets you free in ways nothing else can. Marcus is awaiting trial, and whatever happens in court, we know we've already won the most important battle, breaking the silence that protected him. I'm applying to colleges now, looking at programs in psychology and victim advocacy. I don't know if I'll ever fully heal from what happened, but I'm determined to use my experience to help others. Last week, I visited Oscar's grave for the first time since the funeral I wasn't allowed to attend. I brought his favorite candy and told him everything that had happened. I like to think he heard me, that he knows now he wasn't responsible for what Marcus did to him. Most importantly, I told him he wasn't alone anymore, that the truth had finally come out, and it had set all of us free.